I think.
Yeah, we have to work with a local college of some sort because they actually teach the small business people, and these are people who already have businesses. They have anywhere from 4 to, I guess, maybe 300 or 400 employees. They probably on average do $1 million or something of that in business, and it's being run. Probably a person to address it to me, and I'll take care. I'll make sure it gets to Dina Powell, who in turn will answer.
Okay.
This is a program that's going to work, Max.
I have no doubt that it will work, and that's why I want to get more involved. Montana is more involved more
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, getting the curriculum right is important to start with. I mean, we're working with people that, they don't have law degrees and they didn't take accounting courses and all that. So we want to have the fundamentals right. Then we want to have people to work with them in their business, and then we want to have financing available. And all three of those legs of the stool are in place now.
That's great. We have something here we call Leadership Montana. Various Montanans are involved in leadership training programs around the state, and I think that's more general, and that's great. But in addition to that, I think we need more the technical, specific small business instruction that you are providing, and we want to get involved very quickly.
Sure.
Good. Other questions?
Mr. Buffett, my name is Ron Newberry from the Newberry Law Firm in Montana here, and I've been involved in a number of startup companies over the years, and one of the critical aspects that seems to be missing here in Montana is financing for startup companies. If you could look around this room, I can see 10,000 great ideas that lack financing. And there will be a short breakout session this afternoon, but having been through some of those, I'm not overly optimistic. I'd like to know who is available to look at and competently analyze serious business plans and financial projections for the people in this room that have great ideas that could go to market, but for that financing.
Well, I would say usually, certainly your local banker or other people who are already in business in your geographical area are two good people or two good groups to check with. I hear a lot of stories about how the banks aren't lending, and so certainly they're not making some of the loans they made a few years ago, which weren't really the smartest loans in the world. But right now, our country's banks have over $1 trillion on deposit with the Federal Reserve, and I believe it's earning 0.25%. There is money available for good loans. Now, equity capital, it requires a certain amount of equity capital to be matched by loans, but the banks, I know Wells Fargo is they would love to have $50 billion more of loans now. So go in and talk to the banker if you've got a good idea about a business and you have some equity capital. You can't expect to borrow the entire amount for a new business. You've got to have appropriate equity capital, just like you need a down payment in terms of homes. But I think you might find that, as contrasted with a year and a half ago, the banks weren't lending to anybody, including me. I mean, I was going around with my tin cup too, and I was not getting any place. But that has changed dramatically in the last year. I mean, the excess reserves that are sitting at the Fed, the banks would love to get out because 0.25% you don't get rich on, and they're looking for good loans, but it does require equity, and it requires a good business idea, and it requires the right kind of person running the business.
Warren, how big is your tin cup?
Well, I was looking for about a year and a half ago. The banks were not talking to anybody. I mean, your friendly banker was not so friendly at that time. But that has just changed. It's night and day since a year ago or a year and a half ago, Max.
I think that's right, but it still is true. It's hard for Montana businessmen to get financing. It's so-called valley of death. You start out a little bit, but then you try to grow the next step, and it's just very, very difficult. We've tried to find angel investors, venture capitalists, in addition to conventional bankers, and that's a project I think that somehow some of us should focus more on, because financing for companies, small companies, has been an issue for some time. Even in the good days, it's an issue.
This 10,000 small business initiative we got, there's a lot of emphasis on that because that is a perennial problem for a small business person.
Yeah, it is. Okay, next.
Hi, Warren. My name is Brian Kondracki. I work at the Employment Source in Billings, Montana. I have to say I'm a big fan, and I've never had the resources to purchase that lunch you auction off each year, so this is a close second. So my question is, which of the emerging alternative energy technologies do you see as the most promising from a financial point of view?
Well, I don't ever tout specific stocks, and we don't really have a lot of investment in that sort of thing. As Max mentioned earlier, I sort of go for the, I'm back in the 20th century on most of my companies, but they're good, solid companies. I have not really tried to do much in startups over the years. Now, we have an investment in a company that's working on an electric, on a battery-powered car, and I think within not many years, you're going to see a huge change toward electric-powered vehicles, and I think that's coming. Who will be the winners in that? I don't know. I mean, you know, the General Motors, I think, has the Volt coming out on November 11th, and but I'm not good at picking winners in startups. I'm better at looking at companies that have been around a long time, and if you look at our portfolio businesses, many have been around for over 100 years. So I'll leave. You probably ought to ask Steve Ballmer what great startups are.
Warren, let me ask you a question that's related. As we come out of the recession and as the world changes, and you have your investment strategy in mind, what you think makes most sense for Berkshire Hathaway and your companies, et cetera. Can you give us the benefit of your thoughts of what, with changes in investments in America and in the world, what changes would be beneficial to rural states like Montana, or where could Montana sort of get ahead of the curve a little bit based upon the changes that you tend to see, the shifts in investment over the years, and what might we maybe watch out for? But how can we best take advantage of the changes, the very basic investment changes that you think could be occurring in America and the world over the next 4 or 5, 6, 10 years?
Well, generally exploit your strengths. I mean, you play to your strengths. Low sulfur coal is, I mean, the world is going to need it. You know, Asia's going to need it. China's going to need it, and it has real advantages. So that could be a huge opportunity. You know, just becoming more and more productive in terms of farming is, you know, has done wonders over the years. I mean, when you go back a few hundred years, we had practically everybody in the country working at farming, and now we're so productive that we have a very small percentage of the population, but we're turning out all kinds of products. So I would work with strengths always. The main thing you really want is a prosperous country. I mean, it is very difficult to have some state that's doing wonderfully and have 49 other states that aren't doing so well. So, and in that respect, you know, I'm a huge bull on this country. I mean, it is. We are not going to have a double-dip recession at all. I see our businesses coming back almost across the board. Housing will be the last thing. I mean, that it's taken long. We have a big inventory. We have a big inventory overhang, and that has to be worked through. But this country, what's worked for 34 years is going to keep working, and it won't be tomorrow. But I see in our business, I've seen sentiment turn sour in the last 3 months or so, generally in the media. I don't see that in our businesses. I see, you know, we are employing more people than we were a month ago and 2 months ago. So what you really want to do is you want to have a country that's working well, and then I think it'll work well for most of the people in the United States.
Good. Thank you. Other questions?
Good morning, Mr. Buffett, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brenda Olson, and my company is ORG Corporation. I'm in Big Fork, Montana. We help businesses self-insure and form captive insurance companies, and Montana has some great legislation here. We have close to 50 captive insurance companies domiciled here. The big challenge I think that we face as a state is, you know, number one, in promoting our state as a great place for insurance, but also I think some of the challenges that businesses from all over the U.S. that come to Montana to have their captives is in dealing with the other states. And so I'm interested in what your perspective is regarding what either the federal government should do or what states could do to help with really this interstate aspect of insurance, which, as you know, is regulated on a state-by-state basis.
Yeah, Brenda, I would say if you have 50 captives, you're doing very well, because that's probably more than virtually any other state. I think Vermont has a lot of captives. But it's interesting you raise that, because Omaha, where I live, used to be a railroad and livestock center, and it transformed over the years into a major insurance center. We employ thousands of people in Nebraska in that, and it's really because we've had a Nebraska insurance department that has worked very well with people, for example, like probably your clients that want to open up captives. So working with your insurance department, it is a state-by-state business, and if you have a cooperative, knowledgeable, responsive insurance department, you're going to attract insurance companies just like Nebraska has, and like apparently you have if you have 50 captives. So I would, I think insurance will continue to be regulated on a state-by-state basis, and you can have a comparative advantage against states where it's more difficult to do business. So I encourage you to work with your Montana Insurance Department. It sounds to me like you have been.
Okay, next.
Good morning. It's Sheila Rice with NeighborWorks Montana. Senator Baucus, thank you for another
Sheila.
very
Good seeing
powerful
you.
economic
Bet.
development. Thank you for your support of affordable and workforce housing. I want to compliment Mr. Buffett on Clayton Homes initiative to provide assistance in a national nonprofit delivery system for affordable quality housing. But my question is regarded, and my compliments to you, Mr. Buffett, on the philanthropy efforts that you have done working with other wealthy people in terms of the 50% pledge. My question is, how can philanthropy best influence economic development?
Well, I think that it has done much in the area of microfinance around the world, and I think there'll be a lot more done in that arena. You mentioned affordable housing. I think Berkshire Hathaway may be the #1 participant in affordable housing this year. We've signed up for hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects working through firms like Enterprise and the National Equity Fund. I can't tell you where all those projects are because those funds run them, but I'm sure there are some in Montana. Part of what we're going to do on this philanthropy push that I've worked with Bill and Melinda Gates on is we're not only going to try to get people to be more philanthropic, but particularly very rich people, but we're also going to try through getting them together and hearing each other's ideas to get to be smarter about it. Because in philanthropy, there's no market test. I mean, if you can turn out a good hamburger, the world will find you and you'll do very well. In philanthropy, you can be very efficient and effective in what you're doing, or you can be ineffective, and there is no market test that puts you out of business. You just keep spending your 5% of the principal a year, and philanthropy can be done better. Everything can be done better, but philanthropy in particular can be done better, and we're hoping that by getting people involved not only with their money, but with exchanging ideas, that philanthropy 10, 20, 30 years from now will not only represent a bigger portion of the national pie, but it'll be directed better. We're going to have a get-together early next year of the people that have signed the pledge, and I think everybody there will be listening to what everybody else says about how to do it right and what they've done wrong in the past. You learn from your mistakes, and it's a lot better to learn from somebody else's mistakes than to learn from your own. So we'll be looking at questions like you raise, and the idea is to figure out how the private sector, through philanthropy, can get solutions to some problems that really